Why was her warning brushed aside so easily? Captain Emma Mitchell had spoken with precision, her voice steady, her finger tracing the ridgeline on the glowing map. It wasn't emotion. It wasn't instinct. It was fact. The terrain was a trap. Yet her words had dissolved into the stale air of the briefing room like they'd never been spoken. The men at the table carried themselves with the weight of years, weathered faces, voices full of practiced authority. They spoke of operations, of targets, of insertion points and timelines as if nothing unpredictable could happen beneath the Afghan sun. But Emma knew better. She stood at the back, arms folded across her flight suit, eyes fixed on the digital display. On paper, she was the youngest A-10 pilot in her squadron. On the ground, she was the daughter of Jack Thunderbolt Mitchell, a man whose name still carried whispers in old hangars, a pilot who had died in the cockpit before she was old enough to understand what war really demanded. The major in charge, Reynolds, had barely looked at her when she raised her hand. The ravine funnels directly between two elevated ridges, its perfect high ground for an ambush. His reply had been clipped. "Thank you, Captain Mitchell. Your concerns are noted." Noted, a word that meant dismissed. She held her ground anyway. "Sir, if the enemy knows the approach, they'll have crew-served weapons placed here and here. That gives them interlocking fields of fire across the entire valley floor, if our people get caught there." The silence that followed was heavy. Reynolds straightened, his voice sharp as the shadows across his jaw. "Captain, remind me, how many deployments have you logged?" 3 months, sir," she said quietly. "Exactly. Some of us have spent decades in this region. Let's not confuse classroom analysis with combat-tested judgment." Her jaw locked, but she didn't move. She wanted to say it. Physics doesn't care how long you've been here. Ballistics doesn't care about seniority, but she swallowed it. She had already been told her role, logistics. Not combat, not the seat she wanted. Logistics. The meeting rolled on without her. Outside the briefing room, her footsteps echoed down the concrete corridor lined with plaques and names, pilots who had never come home. She traced them with her eyes, wondering if she'd one day be another line etched into that wall. "Reynolds is wrong." The voice came from the shadows near the exit, a gravelly tone roughened by age and years of smoke. Colonel Bill Harrison leaned against the wall, arms crossed, silver hair catching the faint light. Emma stopped, her eyes narrowing. "You were in there the whole time." He gave a faint shrug. "Long enough." He wasn't her commander anymore, retired technically, a relic of another era, but here he was, lingering at Bram Air Base as a technical advisor, a man whose silence carried more authority than Reynolds' speeches. "You've got good instincts," Harrison said, "better than most. The Coringal Valley eats men alive. Your analysis was dead on." Emma searched his face. "Then why didn't you say anything in there?" "Because Reynolds wouldn't have listened to me either. He already made up his mind. And once a man like him locks the book shut, no one opens it again." Her frustration flared. "So we just let 80 men walk into a kill box." Harrison pushed off the wall, falling into step beside her. They passed rows of parked warthogs, their hulking silhouettes crouched in revetments like armored beasts waiting for war. "You remind me of your father," he said suddenly. The word stopped her. She turned sharply. "You knew him." "Flew with him," Harrison said softly. "Desert Storm." He had that same look in his eyes, stubborn, intense, like he'd rather die than stay quiet when he knew something was wrong. Emma felt her throat tighten. Few people mentioned her father by name. Even fewer looked her in the eye when they did. "He died in Iraq," she said quietly. "I know," Harrison's voice was gentler now. "I was there when they brought back the wreckage. He saved a unit of Marines, flew through 4 SAM sites to get to them. His A-10 took hits that should have ripped the bird apart, but he stayed on target. That stubbornness of his, it saved lives, and cost him his own." Emma's eyes dropped to the tarmac beneath her boots. She remembered the folded flag, her mother's trembling hands. She remembered the silence of Arlington, the echo of taps carried by the wind. "You have his eyes," Harrison said, "and his fight, that's not always a blessing." They reached the old hangar that had been converted into a museum. Harrison swiped his badge and led her inside. The place was quiet, filled with relics of past wars, battered helmets, fragments of fuselage, photographs yellowing at the edges. He stopped in front of a glass case. Inside, a helmet rested, cracked, scorched, saved from destruction. A photograph beside it showed two pilots grinning in the desert sun, sand swirling at their boots. One of them was Harrison, younger, the other, unmistakably, her father. Emma froze, her breath caught in her chest. "This was his," Harrison said, nodding at the helmet. "Saved his life once. Didn't save him the second time. That's the way it goes in this line of work. No guarantees." Her reflection wavered in the glass, lined up with the face of her father in the photo. For a moment, she swore she could feel his presence, the ghost of his hand resting on her shoulder. "Why are you showing me this?" she whispered. "Because Reynolds doesn't get it. The A-10 isn't pretty, isn't fast, isn't modern. But when Americans are pinned down and dying, it's the only angel ugly enough to fly through hell and bring them home. Your father knew that, and so do you." Emma stared at the photo. Her pulse quickened, but not with fear, with resolve. Harrison's voice softened. "Reynolds may think you're green, but when the moment comes, and it will come, you'll need to decide. You follow the book or you follow your gut." His words lingered long after he left her in the hangar. That night, Emma sat in the simulator building, the glow of the screens casting shadows across her tired face. She had discovered a glitch weeks ago, a loophole in the software. With the right sequence, she could bypass the standard training missions and program her own. And so she did. The Coringal Valley filled her screens, every ridge and tree rendered in digital precision. She ran the mission over and over again. Low passes, danger-close gun runs, dodging SAMs and small arms fire. Each time she adjusted, improved. 47 times she flew the valley until she knew every rock formation like the lines on her own hand. On the 47th run, she achieved the impossible. Perfect suppression, zero friendly casualties. When she pulled the helmet off, Harrison was there, watching from the doorway. "Your father used to do the same thing," he said. "Broke into sims at night, practiced until the rules stopped mattering." Emma tried to laugh, but her throat was tight. "Then I guess it runs in the family." Harrison nodded once. "So does the cost." The next morning, she walked into the operations center again. Reynolds barely acknowledged her, but she carried the weight of knowledge he didn't have, the certainty that if nothing changed, 81 men would die in a valley carved for ambush. And for the first time, she felt it heavy in her chest, the same burden her father had carried years before. But there was something she hadn't told anyone, not Reynolds, not even Harrison. Not yet. Why did no one else see it? The maps were clear. The ridgelines weren't subtle. Anyone with half an eye could see the funneling terrain, the natural choke point. Yet the plan went forward anyway, stamped with official signatures, sealed with the arrogance of certainty. Emma Mitchell had learned early in her career that speaking truth to power rarely earned allies. But this time, silence felt like complicity. She tried once more. "Sir," she said firmly, standing beside the operations table. "The insertion path puts them directly between two ridges with no cover. If they're ambushed—" Major Reynolds cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Captain Mitchell, your concerns were noted yesterday. The mission is proceeding as planned. Unless you have logistics updates, this conversation is over." The words landed like a hammer. Around the table, officers shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke up for her, not one. She stood there a moment longer, her face neutral, her pulse hammering. Then she nodded. "Understood, sir." But she did not walk out alone. In the corridor, a voice caught her ear. Captain Mitchell. She turned. Sergeant Riley Jenkins, one of the intelligence analysts, stepped into her path. His uniform was rumpled, his eyes red from sleepless hours in front of screens. "For what it's worth," he said, lowering his voice, "I think you're right." Emma frowned. "You've seen chatter." He nodded. "Encrypted traffic spiked around Coringal 3 nights ago. Not enough to trigger an official flag, but enough to make me nervous. I reported it 3 times. They brushed it off as drug smugglers." Emma's pulse quickened. "And if it was?" "Then those ridges are already hot," Jenkins said grimly. Her throat tightened. "We have to warn them." "Ma'am, that's career suicide." His eyes flicked down the hall, toward Reynolds's office. "Chain of command doesn't forgive people who go around it." Emma's reply was flat. "Neither do funerals." Jenkins studied her a moment, then exhaled. "Lieutenant Marcus Carter, he's leading the op. He's in Hangar 4 for final prep." Emma gave a sharp nod. "Thank you, Sergeant." "I was never here," Jenkins said quietly, before disappearing into the bustle of the base. Hangar 4 buzzed with controlled chaos. SEAL Team 7 and their support elements were finalizing gear checks, radios, weapons, medical kits. Their faces were set in the calm professionalism of men who lived one mission at a time. Emma's presence drew stares. Pilots didn't walk into pre-mission briefings for ground operators, and female pilots almost never did. She ignored the eyes. She wasn't here for them. She was here for Carter. He stood alone, studying a 3D terrain model projected on a portable screen. He was tall, broad-shouldered, but lean, not a man built for show, but for endurance. His face was lined by sun and years, his expression calm, eyes sharp. "Lieutenant Carter," she said. He turned, brow furrowed. "Captain Mitchell, A-10 Squadron, right? What can I do for you?" She wasted no time. "Your insertion route, it's compromised." Carter's tone didn't shift, but there was a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "You're not on my planning staff." "No, but I've flown Coringal in Sim 47 times. I know those ridges. If the enemy has heavy weapons in place, your men will have no cover for 300 meters. You'll be in a kill box before you know it." Carter crossed his arms, studying her. "How long have you been flying the Hog, Captain?" 3 years. "And you're telling me I don't know how to read terrain?" Emma's jaw tightened. "I'm telling you the terrain doesn't care how long you've been here. It favors the defender, always has." For a moment the air between them bristled with tension. Then Carter glanced at the map again, his eyes narrowing. "Jenkins gave you this?" he asked suddenly. Emma blinked. "You know him." "He's solid, one of the best intel guys we've got." "He believes the chatter points to enemy prep in the valley," Emma said quickly. "That's why I came here. If I'm wrong, you lose nothing. If I'm right, you lose everyone." Carter was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he exhaled slowly. "You sound like your father." Emma's breath caught. "You knew him." "My uncle did. 1st Marines, Kuwait. They called him Thunderbolt Jack. Said he flew through fire and steel to save them. That story stuck." Emma looked away, her throat tightening. "He died in Iraq, saving more men." Carter nodded slowly. "Then maybe you're not wrong to be here." He leaned closer to the map, studying the alternate route she traced with her finger. Longer, slower, but with cover and options. "It adds 3 hours," he said. "It adds life," Emma replied. Silence stretched. Then Carter folded the map, sliding it back into its case. "No promises, but I'll take it to my team." Relief washed through her. "That's all I ask." He extended his hand. "Whatever happens, Captain, thank you." She took it, firm grip, steady eyes. For the first time since the briefing, she felt less alone. That afternoon, Emma walked the flight line under the punishing Afghan sun. The heat shimmered off the tarmac. Her boots echoed against concrete as she passed aircraft lined in their revetments. F-16s, Apache, and then her bird. The 297, the same A-10 her father had once flown. Its fuselage bore the scars of rebuilds, its paint dulled, its frame heavier than it looked. Ugly, beautiful, indestructible. Harrison was waiting for her beside it. His weathered hands rested against the armored skin, his eyes tracing the lines of the war machine like an old friend. "She's ready," he said. Emma frowned. "Ready for what? She's not tasked for the mission." "Doesn't matter, I had her fueled, armed, topped off countermeasures, just in case." Emma stiffened. "That's irregular." "So is burying 81 men," Harrison shot back. His voice softened. "Your father taught me this bird could do things no other could, and sometimes orders don't keep up with reality." Before Emma could reply, her radio crackled. "Captain Mitchell, report to operations immediately." She and Harrison locked eyes. "Be ready," he said simply. The operations center was alive with tension. Screens glowed with feeds, officers moved with urgency, voices clipped and sharp. Reynolds stood at the center, jaw tight. "Captain Mitchell," he said as she entered, "you're familiar with the SEAL mission." "Yes, sir." The timelines changed, targets moving earlier than expected, teams already deployed. Emma froze. "They're moving in daylight." "Affirmative." Her stomach turned to stone. Daylight meant exposure. Daylight meant death. She swallowed hard. "Sir, my earlier analysis." "Was noted," Reynolds said, cutting her off. His tone was final. "They've accepted the risk. Mission proceeds." Emma forced her face still, though inside she was screaming. She looked at the tactical screen, blue icons moving toward the valley, toward the funnel. Hours passed in tense silence. The team reported progress, no contact. The room buzzed with restrained anticipation. Then, at 14:05 hours, the calm shattered. "Base Trident actual. Contact, contact. Heavy fire, 3 ridge lines, multiple crew-served weapons, we are compromised." Gunfire rattled through the radio. Shouts, explosions. Then Carter's voice again, hard and clipped through chaos. "We are surrounded, taking casualties. Ammunition low, need immediate air support." Reynolds' jaw clenched. "Air assets." "F-16s 20 minutes out," an officer replied. "Apache." 15 minutes. Carter's voice cut through again. "We don't have 15. Overrun in under 10. Emma's pulse hammered in her ears. She knew what 15 minutes meant. 15 minutes meant 81 folded flags. Her voice cracked the silence. "Sir, the A-10s are ready. I can be there in 12. Reynolds didn't even look at her. "Negative. Danger close requires senior pilots, not you." "Sir," she said, stepping closer, "I've flown this exact scenario 47 times. I know the ridges. I know the runs. I can." "Simulation isn't combat, Mitchell." The radio roared again. 8 wounded, ammunition critical, cannot hold." Emma locked eyes with Reynolds. "Sir, 81 Americans are about to die while we debate procedure." "Stand down, Captain." His tone was ice. "That's an order." Her fists curled. Her throat burned with the weight of the choice. Obey or act. And in that instant, she remembered her father's words. Words she had never spoken aloud. Sometimes the rule book isn't enough. Sometimes you have to write your own page. But if she did, there would be no going back. Not for her, not for her career. And maybe not for her life. What did she have left to lose? The room pulsed with urgency, radios flaring with Carter's clipped, desperate calls, officers shuffling maps, Reynolds snapping orders. Yet for Emma everything slowed. Time stretched, sound dulled. Only one thought cut through the haze. They're going to die. She felt it in her bones, not a possibility, a certainty. She turned her head just slightly to the tactical screen. Blue icons trapped in a bowl of terrain ringed by red threats, outnumbered, outgunned, out of time. Her hands clenched at her sides. Her pulse hammered. Reynolds's voice echoed in her ears, "Stand down, Captain, that's an order." And she almost did, almost sat there, almost convinced herself that it wasn't her fight, that she was just a junior pilot with no right to intervene, that someone else would step up. But no one else was stepping up. Her father's voice rose in memory, rough and certain, words he'd spoken years before she lost him. "Sometimes, Emmy, dignity doesn't argue, it just acts." Her decision was already made. She slipped out of the operations center while every eye was fixed on the failing mission. No one stopped her. Her boots echoed down the corridor, quick, steady, purposeful. Each step carried her further away from obedience and closer to treason. In her quarters, she tore a sheet of paper from her notebook, scrawling in hurried strokes. "If you're reading this, I acted because 81 Americans were dying while the rule book argued with itself. Tell my mother I love her." She left it on her desk, no time for more. Then she ran. The late afternoon sun bathed the flight line in molten gold. Shadows stretched long over the tarmac as Emma sprinted toward the A-10 revetments. Every stride pounded the same thought into her chest. 12 minutes. I can make it in 12. The 297 waited like a silent beast, its fuselage armored, its nose dominated by the monstrous Avenger cannon. The same aircraft her father had flown into storms of fire decades before. The same aircraft Harrison had fueled, armed, and readied, as if he had known this moment would come. The crew chief looked up, startled. "Captain, I wasn't informed." "Emergency scramble," Emma snapped, breathless but firm. "SEAL Team 7 is under fire. I need this bird." He hesitated, searching her eyes. Then, without another word, he nodded. "She's hot, full combat load, countermeasures primed." Emma climbed the ladder, sliding into the cockpit. Her hands moved on instinct, switches, toggles, checks. Engines spooled to life with a rising whine that rattled the revetment walls. The smell of fuel and heated metal filled the air. "Tower, Thunderbolt 3 requesting immediate clearance for takeoff," she said into her headset. The controller's voice came back, confused. "Thunderbolt 3, no flight plan filed. Confirm authorization." Her jaw set. "Authorization, 81 Americans about to die. I'm rolling." She advanced the throttles. The A-10 lurched forward, rumbling onto the runway. Figures appeared at the edge of her canopy, security forces, waving, shouting, too late. The Hawk gathered speed, her engines bellowing. The runway blurred beneath her, and then lift. The A-10 clawed into the sky, heavy but unyielding, leaving the base shrinking in her rearview mirrors. "Thunderbolt 3 airborne," she transmitted. "Inbound Coringal Valley, ETA 12 minutes. Silence, then a voice not from command but from the battlefield itself. "Thunderbolt 3, this is Trident Actual." Carter's voice, raw with strain and gunfire in the background. "We are surrounded on 3 sides. SAM threat confirmed. Do you have danger close authorization?" Emma pressed the throttles to max. The mountains rushed beneath her, sharp peaks catching the last light of day. "I'm authorized to save Americans, Lieutenant. Mark your positions with IR strobes. I'll be on your shoulder in 11 minutes. For the first time she heard it, hope in his voice. "Copy that, Thunderbolt." Her headset crackled again, this time with rage. "Reynolds." "Mitchell, return to base immediately. That's a direct order." Her hand hovered over the radio switch. Her stomach clenched. She could obey. She could turn back, let others bear the weight of what came next. But then another burst of Carter's transmission cut through, ragged with desperation. "We are losing men. Ammunition down to 40%. Emma flipped the command frequency off. Silence. Only the line to Carter remained open. The die was cast. The Coringal Valley rose ahead, a scar carved deep into the mountains. Shadows pooled in its depths. Jagged ridges crowned its edges like the teeth of a predator. And inside that maw, men were bleeding, fighting, dying. Emma's breath came steady now. Her fear hadn't vanished, it had crystallized into focus. Every lesson from her father, every hour in the simulator, every warning Harrison had given, all of it led to this. She banked low, circling wide to survey the valley. Through her canopy, she saw it, the flashes of muzzle fire along the ridges, sparks of chaos scattered across stone. The blue glow of IR strobes pulsing faintly near the valley floor, marking the SEAL's last position. It was worse than she'd imagined. 3 ridge lines alive with gunfire, RPGs arcing toward the pinned Americans, and beyond them, the faint, sickly smoke trails of surface-to-air missiles poised like coiled snakes. Carter's voice came calm despite the storm. "Be advised, enemy has multiple heavy positions. We've lost our northern route. They're closing in." Emma's eyes narrowed. "Copy, Trident. I count 3 primary weapons nests. I'll start with the eastern ridge, then southern, then west. After that, I'll hunt the SAMs. We're danger close in sectors 2 and 3. Enemy within 50 meters." Her pulse quickened. Standard rules for bad engagement within 100 meters. Too much risk of friendly fire, but rules didn't matter anymore. "Understood," she said evenly. "Stand by for first run." She shoved the stick forward, dropping the A-10 into the valley like a falling blade. Warning tones screamed in her headset as enemy targeting systems locked on. Tracers clawed skyward, bright streaks against the dusk. The hog rattled under their touch, but she held steady. At 1,500 feet she could see them. Enemy fighters clustered along the ridge, silhouettes scrambling, machine guns flashing. Eastern ridge, guns hot. Her finger squeezed the trigger. The Avenger cannon roared to life, its monstrous thunder tearing through the air. The entire aircraft shuddered under the recoil as a stream of depleted uranium shells stitched fire across the rocks. Dust erupted. Flesh, stone, and steel shattered alike. Emma pulled hard, banking away as warning sirens blared. A missile streaked past her left wing, confused by countermeasures. Carter's voice came sharp. "Good effect on target, eastern ridge suppressed, Team 3 repositioning." Emma's lips tightened in grim satisfaction. 1 down, 2 to go. She lined up again, this time on the southern ridge, dangerously close to the SEAL's position. "Southern ridge, danger close, 50 meters. We're buttoned down, send it." She dropped low, almost scraping the valley walls. Fighters turned, RPGs lifting. She didn't hesitate. A half-second burst, precise, surgical. The ridge exploded in sparks and screams. Her cockpit rang with the ping of enemy fire, around grazing armor sparking against her canopy. She gritted her teeth and climbed. "Direct hit," Carter called. "No friendlies injured. Southern position neutralized." Emma exhaled once. Her knuckles were white on the stick. Every second mattered. Every breath could be her last. But this was what the hog was built for. "Western ridge," she muttered, banking hard. "Then I'll take the SAMs." The valley below seethed with chaos. But in that chaos, Emma felt a strange calm. Fear was still there, sharp, electric. But beneath it was something steadier. Something that felt almost like destiny. Like her father's ghost was flying with her. How long could one aircraft stand against an entire valley of fire? Emma Mitchell asked herself that as she pulled hard into a climbing turn, the hog's engines howling in protest. The cockpit rattled like it might tear itself apart. Warning tones screamed in her headset, lock-ons, missile threats, systems pushed to their limits. Below, the Coringal Valley writhed with chaos. The SEALs were pinned tighter than before, blue strobes blinking desperately amid the dust and smoke. Enemy fighters swarmed the ridges like ants, regrouping even after her devastating runs. And now, the real killers had shown their teeth. Surface-to-air missile trails curled upward from the far slope, white claws streaking toward her silhouette. "Trident Actual, Thunderbolt 3. I've got SAM activity West Ridge," she said, forcing calm into her voice. "I'll engage." Carter's reply came back strained, gunfire echoing faintly behind him. "Copy. We're falling back to secondary cover. You take those SAMs or we're finished." She didn't need the reminder. One missile, just one, would turn the Hog into flaming wreckage. Emma dove low, skimming the valley floor. The Hog's bulky frame wasn't built for grace, but it was built for this, to fly slow, low, and stubborn, where sleeker jets wouldn't dare. Dust churned in her wake as she hugged the ground, weaving between jagged stone. Her eyes swept the ridge. Then she saw it, a camouflaged battery nestled among rocks, its launcher tube swiveling, searching. Target acquired. Her finger squeezed the trigger. The Avenger cannon erupted, spitting fire and fury. The ridge vanished in a storm of dust and shrapnel. Explosions rippled as warheads cooked off in their launchers, a chain reaction of destruction. Emma pulled hard left, fighting the G-forces pressing against her chest. Another locked tone screamed. A missile fired. Flares now, she punched the release. Bright decoys scattered, burning hot against the sky. The missile curved, confused, then detonated harmlessly behind her. Her lungs burned as she gasped for breath. Sweat stung her eyes. She forced her focus back. One sight down, at least two more. "Trident actual, first SAM neutralized," she reported. Carter's reply was clipped but fierce. "Copy. That bought us seconds, keep hitting them." Seconds, that was all she had bought. Seconds in exchange for her life on the line. She banked again, scanning. Another plume rose from the northern ridge, a second SAM firing. "Damn it," she muttered, diving straight toward it. The Hog bucked under fire, rounds pinging off armor. Warning lights blinked on her panel. She ignored them. Closer, closer. The second battery came into view, men scrambling around its base, reloading tubes. Emma lined it up, but a missile screamed off the rails before she could fire. "Too late," she whispered. The missile streaked toward her, faster than her battered bird could outfly. Her instincts took over. She dropped altitude hard, skimming so low she could almost feel the valley floor rushing beneath her. She popped countermeasures, bright sparks flaring behind her. The missile closed, her chest clenched. Then it detonated just short, the blast rocking her Hog, slamming her against the restraints. The canopy cracked but held. Systems flickered. Her ears rang. She leveled out, teeth gritted, vision tunneling. She was still alive, barely. "Not today," she growled, lining up her shot. The Avenger roared again, and the second SAM sight disintegrated under the storm of fire. "Two down." Her panel screamed with alarms. Hydraulic pressure low, right engine damaged. Warning lights glowed angry red. She forced her voice steady. "Thunderbolt 3, second SAM neutralized. Aircraft sustaining damage, continuing mission." There was silence on the line, then Carter's voice, softer now. "You don't have to keep going, you've already saved us." Emma shook her head, though no one could see it. "Not enough. They'll pin you again if I leave them operational. I'm not leaving you behind." The third sight revealed itself with cruel timing. A flash on the western slope, another missile rising. Her Hog shuddered, systems faltering. She had one good engine, one bad, and a cockpit full of alarms. But she turned anyway, angling straight toward it. The missile streaked toward her. She rolled, flares bursting, chaff scattering. The missile veered, clipped her left wing with a glancing explosion. Metal screamed. The Hog dropped, struggling to stay aloft. Her teeth clenched, her vision blurred. "Hold together, girl, just a little longer." She leveled out barely. The SAM sight filled her HUD. She lined up, hands trembling but steady. Guns hot. The Avenger's roar thundered one more time. Shells chewed through the launcher, the operators, the hillside itself. Fire and smoke erupted, billowing into the sky. Silence followed. 3 sights down. The valley was quieter now, the ridges no longer belching missiles. Small arms fire still rattled, but the worst had passed. The SEALs were alive, still surrounded, still bloodied but alive. Emma's chest heaved. Her cockpit stank of ozone, sweat, and burning insulation. Warning lights still blinked furiously. She touched the cracked canopy, whispering, "You're still with me." Then Carter's voice came again, raw but steadier. "Thunderbolt 3, you did it. SAM threat neutralized. We can move. You bought us our way out." Relief hit her like a wave, but it was fleeting. Because her fuel gauge told another story. Low, critically low. She'd burned it all in the fight, afterburners, maneuvers, evasions. She could maybe get the seals clear, but she might not have enough to make it home. Her throat tightened. She thought of her mother, of the note she'd left, of her father's name etched into Arlington stone. "Copy, Trident," she said softly. "Stay tight. I'll cover your withdrawal. You're not leaving. Not until you're safe." Silence, then Carter's voice, quiet but fierce. "You're out here alone for us. We won't forget this." Emma banked once more, the battered hog groaning in protest. Below, she saw them moving, tiny figures darting from cover, dragging the wounded, regrouping. Alive, because she had refused to stand down. And she knew then, this was the page she had written in the rule book, her page. But there was something Carter didn't know, something she hadn't told him or anyone. She wasn't sure she had the fuel to climb back out of the valley. Not yet. How do you measure the worth of a life? Emma Mitchell asked herself that as her eyes flicked between the cracked canopy and the fuel gauge, the needle sinking lower with each passing second. Numbers didn't lie. No matter how steady her hands, no matter how sharp her instincts, when the tank bled dry, the hog would fall. And yet below her, 81 lives still fought for every breath. She banked gently, circling the valley, keeping the hog between the seals and whatever remnants of enemy fire still dared to spark from the ridges. Her bird was wounded, one engine trailing smoke, hydraulics sluggish, systems shrieking warnings she no longer had the strength to silence. But it flew. And while it flew, so did hope. "Thunderbolt 3, this is Trident Actual." Carter's voice cracked over the radio, calmer now but edged with urgency. "We're moving West Ridge, exfil .4 clicks, still taking sporadic fire. We need overhead until we reach cover." Emma's hands tightened on the stick. "Copy, Trident, I've got eyes, you just keep moving. I'll handle the rest." "You're running low, aren't you?" The question froze her. She hadn't said it aloud, but Carter heard the fatigue in her tone, maybe even saw the trail of smoke against the fading light. She hesitated, then softly, "Fuel's critical." Silence followed, long enough for her to imagine his expression, the weight in his eyes, the same weight she carried. Finally his reply, "Then why are you still here?" Her throat tightened, "Because leaving isn't an option." And in those words she felt her father's shadow. Jack Mitchell, the man who had flown into impossible odds to save Marines, who had chosen others over himself. She had never understood his decision when she was a child, never forgiven the empty chair at the dinner table. But here, now, she understood. Because dignity didn't argue, it simply acted. The SEALs moved in bursts, disciplined and efficient even under fire. Emma watched them carry the wounded, covering each other with precision, refusing to break even as exhaustion and loss weighed them down. Their IR strobes pulsed faintly in her HUD, small beacons in a sea of hostility. Every pass she made, every burst of the Avenger cannon, every flare she dropped, it bought them steps, precious steps towards survival. But with each maneuver, her hog grew weaker. The right engine coughed, sputtered. Hydraulics groaned. The aircraft felt heavier, as if gravity itself conspired to drag her down into the valley she was protecting. The radio crackled again. "Thunderbolt, we see movement north slope. Could be reinforcements." Emma squinted. Dust rose along the ridge, silhouettes shifting, weapons glinting in the low light. Enemy reinforcements pouring into the valley like vultures. She banked hard, her battered bird protesting, "I see them, stand by." Her HUD danced with warnings, fuel low, pressure critical, system failure imminent. She ignored it all, lined up the ridge. Guns hot. The Avenger roared one more time, fire ripping through the dusk. Shells tore into the slope, scattering the reinforcements in bursts of earth and flame. Screams echoed faintly, swallowed by the valley's stone walls. Emma pulled up, her breath ragged. The hog shuddered, alarms shrieking. She slammed a gloved hand against the console. "Stay with me, not yet." The gauges told the truth. Minutes of fuel, maybe less. Her vision blurred for a heartbeat, black edges creeping into her sight. She forced air into her lungs, forced focus back. She couldn't falter. Not yet. Carter's voice came again, closer now, almost intimate. "We're at the exfil point. Birds are inbound for pickup. Another 5 minutes, Mitchell. Can you hold?" She wanted to laugh, but the sound stuck in her throat. 5 minutes. She wasn't sure she had 3. Still, her reply was steady. "I'll hold." Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from fatigue, from the toll of carrying life and death in her grip. Every muscle ached, every nerve screamed, and yet beneath it all something deeper held her steady. Pride. Not the arrogance Reynolds carried, not the blind pride of rank, but the quiet kind, the kind that came from knowing she had given everything she could. She circled again, firing short bursts to keep the ridges suppressed. Each trigger pull drained more from her bird, but it didn't matter. If the hog died with her inside, it would die doing what it was built for. The sun dipped lower, shadows lengthening across the valley. Her cracked canopy caught the light, splintering it into fractured gold. For a moment it was beautiful, almost peaceful. Her father's face flickered in memory, his grin wide and fearless, the way he had lifted her onto his shoulders as a child, pointing at the sky. "That's where angels live, Emmy. Ugly angels, but angels all the same." Her chest tightened. Maybe this was what he had felt, the peace of knowing the sacrifice had meaning. The radio hissed. "Thunderbolt, this is Trident. Pickups are inbound, 2 minutes out. You're clear to break off." Break off. The words hung in the air like a lifeline. She glanced at her fuel gauge. The needle lay almost flat. She doubted she had the fuel to climb, let alone return to base. But the order was there: break off, save yourself. Her breath shook. Could she? Could she abandon them now, even with salvation seconds away? Her eyes drifted back to the valley floor. The SEALs huddled in their exfil zone, still firing, still shielding the wounded. Carter among them, his voice carrying strength for his men. She shook her head. "Not yet." "Negative, Trident. I'll stay until your wheels are up." "Mitchell." "Not up for debate." Silence followed, but she could feel the weight of his unspoken words. Gratitude, respect, maybe even something deeper, something human and fragile born in fire. Her hog circled one final time. Tracers sparked weakly from the ridges, but she silenced them with short bursts. Her bird trembled, wings scarred, fuselage pitted. Then through the canopy she saw it, the silhouettes of helicopters cresting the horizon, rotors thundering, dark shapes against the dying light. Exfil was here. "Trident, your ride's on station," she said softly. The valley below erupted in new noise, rotor wash kicking up dust, voices shouting, the wounded lifted aboard. Emma watched it unfold like a guardian angel perched above, unseen but ever present. Her gauges screamed final warnings, fuel almost gone, systems failing. She whispered into the silence of her cockpit, not for the radio but for herself. "You did it, Dad. You saved them. And now, so did I." The last of her fuel sputtered. The hog jolted, engines coughing. She steadied her hands, prepared for whatever came. But she didn't leave. Not yet. Not until every helicopter cleared the valley. Because sometimes dignity didn't speak. It just stayed. And she stayed. What happens when the guardian angel runs out of wings? Emma Mitchell asked herself that as her A-10 shuddered in the air, its engines coughing, its cockpit filled with the smell of scorched metal. The fuel gauge was nearly flat, needles trembling at the bottom of the dial. Every warning light screamed at her. The hog was dying. And yet below, the seals were not. They were alive, clustered at the exfil zone as the helicopters descended in a storm of rotor wash. Black silhouettes against the blood-orange dusk. Dust churned around them, figures hauling wounded aboard, covering each other in a ballet of discipline and desperation. It should have been over. But war has a way of taking one last bite. Thunderbolt 3, this is Trident Actual, Carter's voice cut in, tense and rapid. We've got movement. Enemy closing in on the LZ from the north. Mortars setting up. They'll tear the birds apart before we're off the ground. Emma's heart clenched. Her eyes snapped to the slope. And there it was, a line of fighters rushing through the shadows, tubes slung on their shoulders, the telltale angles of mortar bases clattering against rock. If they fired, the helicopters wouldn't stand a chance. Her hands steadied on the stick. She promised to stay until their wheels were up, and promises weren't made to be broken. She banked hard, the hog groaning in protest. Copy, Trident, I see them. Mitchell, you're running on fumes. Break off while you can. She didn't answer. Her mind went quiet. The valley narrowed around her as she dropped altitude, lining up on the slope. Her vision tunneled the rushing ground, the figures scattering, the mortar tubes bracing. She could almost see their eyes lift to her, the beast in the sky bearing down. Her finger curled on the trigger. The Avenger thundered. Shells ripped the slope apart, stone and flesh shattering in equal measure. Mortar tubes tumbled, fighters thrown like rag dolls. Dust erupted, flames licking into the sky. Mortars destroyed, she called. Her voice was steady, too steady. The hog jerked, a new vibration rattling through her frame. She glanced at the panel, left engine failing, power bleeding away. She was flying on stubbornness alone. Then tracers lanced up from the valley's edge, machine guns, desperate fighters trying to bring her down. Bullets pounded against her armor, sparks showering across her canopy. The hog shook, warning tones blared. She gritted her teeth, forcing the stick back, clawing for altitude. Thunderbolt, you're hit. Carter's voice was sharp, frantic. I know, she muttered. Her vision swam. The controls fought her. But she kept climbing, dragging the hog higher, away from the worst of the fire. Below, she saw the helicopters lifting, their rotors chewing air, figures leaning out to cover the ground with suppressing fire. The seals were loading, wounded hauled inside. One by one, the birds rose. Her chest loosened slightly. They were going to make it. But she wasn't sure she would. Her radio crackled again. Thunderbolt, all units aboard, wheels up. You're clear to RTB. Repeat, you're clear to leave. The words hit her like a promise she couldn't keep. Return to base. Not on this fuel. Not with one engine dead and the other coughing smoke. Still, she keyed her mic. Copy, Trident, stay tight to your escorts. I'll follow you out. But she knew it was a lie. Her father's words echoed again, softer now, almost like a lullaby. Sometimes, Emmy, you'll fly a mission you don't come back from, but you'll know why you did it. She steadied her breath, eyes sweeping the valley one last time. Fighters scattered, broken, their ambush shattered. The helicopters wheeled away, rotors beating against the sky, carrying their precious cargo to safety. 81 lives saved. And the hog was still flying. Barely. Her hands trembled. Her vision blurred at the edges. Exhaustion pressed down on her like lead. The aircraft shook with every gust, every wound in its battered frame threatening to tear wider. Thunderbolt, this is Trident, Carter's voice came again, softer this time. We're clear. You don't have to cover us anymore. Emma swallowed hard. Negative, I'll hold high until you're out of range. There was silence on the line, then quietly, you don't have to die here, Mitchell. Her throat burned. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she had no choice, that she'd left herself no way out the moment she took off against orders. But instead she whispered, "It's not about me." Her fuel gauge dipped into nothing. The hog sputtered, engines coughing, then catching again. Just a whisper of thrust left. She pulled the stick gently, climbing higher into the fading light, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the helicopters dwindled into specks. Each second felt stolen, each breath borrowed. And for the first time in years, she felt her father close, not as a memory but as presence, steady, silent, proud. "You did it, Emmy," he whispered in her mind. Her lips trembled into the ghost of a smile. Not yet. Because the hog was still flying. And as long as it flew, so did she. What do you hold on to when there's nothing left? For Emma Mitchell, the cockpit was quieter now. Too quiet. The constant roar of engines that had once rattled her bones was fading into uneven coughs, stuttering like a dying heartbeat. Warning lights pulsed angrily across her panel, but she no longer looked at them. The gauges told the truth. There was nothing left to give. And yet the hog still flew. Below, the valley that had been a cauldron of fire and death grew smaller, swallowed by distance. The helicopters were specks now, carrying 81 Americans to life. She bought them that. She clung to it. Her hands rested lightly on the stick, no longer fighting, no longer forcing. The hog felt fragile, like a wounded animal staggering onward on instinct alone. Every vibration, every groan in the frame reminded her that the end was near. The radio crackled faintly. "Thunderbolt 3, this is Trident Actual. Do you copy?" She pressed her mic, her voice low, steady. "Copy, Trident. We're clear of the valley, en route to Fob Coast. What's your position?" Emma glanced at her HUD. The numbers blurred, failing systems, flickering displays. She knew where she was, though, somewhere over the ridges, climbing higher into the evening sky. Holding at Angels 5, westbound. There was silence, then Carter's voice quieter. "What's your fuel status?" Her throat tightened. She could lie. She could tell him she'd meet them back at base, but lies felt heavy now, too heavy to carry. "0," she said softly. The silence on the other end stretched. She imagined Carter looking at the men packed into the helicopters, their bodies bruised, their uniforms stained with dust and blood. Imagined him realizing the truth. "Mitchell," his voice cracked, then steadied. "You saved us, all of us. Don't you dare think it was for nothing." Her chest ached. She wanted to answer, to tell him it mattered, that it was worth it, but her voice caught in her throat. Instead, she let the silence speak. The hog shuddered violently. The right engine coughed one last time and died, the turbine spinning down into silence. The left followed moments later. The sudden quiet was jarring, unnatural. Now it was only wind, wind against metal, wind carrying her toward the inevitable. Her hands tightened on the stick, guiding the powerless hog through the fading light. She could try for a glide, find flat ground, some forgotten stretch of earth to crash onto. Maybe survive, maybe not. But part of her knew this bird wasn't going home, not today. Her mind wandered, unbidden, back to the beginning. To the day she'd first slipped on a flight suit, the weight of her father's name heavy on her shoulders. To the sneers, the doubts, the dismissals. To the way Reynolds had brushed her off in that briefing room. And to Harrison, his voice steady, his eyes knowing. "When the moment comes, you'll need to decide. You follow the book or you follow your gut." She had decided. Her father's ghost lingered too, softer now. She remembered his laughter, his calloused hands lifting her up, the way he smelled faintly of jet fuel and sweat when he hugged her after a long day. She had hated him for leaving once, but now she understood him. Sacrifice wasn't about glory. It was about leaving the world a little less broken for someone else. Her canopy reflected her face back at her, fractured by cracks in the glass. She barely recognized herself, soot on her cheeks, eyes red from strain, lips pale. But behind the fatigue, there was something steadier, something her father had carried too. "Peace." The radio flared again. "Carter, urgent now. Mitchell, listen to me. We'll come back for you. We'll get a bird in the air, pick you up, just hold out. Do you copy? Emma closed her eyes, the wind rushing around her. She wanted to believe him, but she knew the truth. Her bird was dropping, slower now, sliding down toward the endless ridges. There would be no rescue in time. She pressed her mic one last time. Copy, Trident, tell them the hog did its job. Her voice broke just slightly. She swallowed hard. Tell my mom I kept my promise. Static crackled, then Carter's reply, fierce and raw. I'll tell her, I swear it. You'll be remembered, Mitchell. Every one of us owes you our lives. She let go of the mic. No more words. Words weren't enough. Her hand steadied the stick, guiding the hog toward a distant ridge glowing faintly in the last rays of sun. The world stretched wide and endless around her, mountains fatting into gold, sky bleeding into night. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. The hog dipped lower, groaning, wings scarred and battered but still steady in her grip. She thought of her father again, the stories of how he had flown into impossible fire to save Marines. She thought of the way they had spoken his name with reverence, not because he lived, but because he hadn't turned away. Now she understood. This was her story, too. Her final thought, as the horizon blurred into light, was simple. Sometimes dignity doesn't argue, it just flies. And she flew. How do you remember someone the world never truly saw? Lieutenant Marcus Carter asked himself that in the days after the valley. The helicopters had landed at Fob Coast under cover of night, their cargo battered but alive. 81 men, some broken, some bleeding, all breathing. A miracle, they called it. But Carter knew miracles carried names, and this one's name was Emma Mitchell. The SEALs had stumbled from the birds into the harsh floodlights of the forward operating base, medics swarming them, hands pulling the wounded away on stretchers. The men who could walk leaned against each other, shoulders heavy, eyes hollow, but every single one of them was alive. Alive because a single hog had refused to leave them. Carter remembered turning as the rotors spun down, searching the sky, but the horizon had been empty. No silhouette, no sound of engines, just silence where the hog should have been. And he'd known then. Emma hadn't made it back. The next morning the base was alive with whispers, unauthorized launch, direct violation of orders, A-10 pilot missing, aircraft presumed lost. Major Reynolds said nothing at first, but his silence was damning. His eyes gave him away, sharp, cold, calculating the damage to his record, not the weight of her sacrifice. He spoke once, clipped and final. She disobeyed. She won't be on the wall. Carter's fists had clenched so tight his palms bled. He wanted to shout, to break through that wall of arrogance. But shouting wouldn't change men like Reynolds. They measured worth in obedience, not in lives saved. So Carter carried her story himself. That night the SEALs gathered in the dim glow of a hangar. Not in uniform, not with ceremony. Just men sitting on crates, some smoking, some staring into nothing, their faces lit by the weak yellow of a single bulb. Carter stood in front of them, the weight of silence pressing heavy. He cleared his throat. You all know why we're here. No one spoke, but every eye lifted. She stayed when she didn't have to, Carter said, his voice low. She flew into fire that should have torn her apart. She bought us every step, every breath, every chance to get out alive. You owe your lives to Captain Emma Mitchell. The words hung in the air. Men shifted, swallowing hard. A few bowed their heads. One of the younger SEALs, his arm bandaged, spoke softly. They called those planes angels back in Iraq, ugly angels. Guess they still are. A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Carter nodded slowly. Then let's remember her that way, not as the one they'll leave off their records, but as the angel who stayed when the rest of the world turned away. They raised their canteens, their mugs, whatever they had, a quiet toast in the shadows. To Mitchell, they said. And though no one else on the base heard it, Carter knew it was enough. The days blurred after that. Reports filed, missions planned, orders given. Reynolds moved on quickly, erasing Emma's name from the briefings as if she had never been there. But Carter couldn't erase her. At night, when the base fell silent and the desert winds whispered through the wire, he would hear her voice on the radio. Calm, steady, defiant. Negative, trident, not up for debate. He carried that with him. 2 weeks later, when the SEALs rotated back stateside, Carter made a quiet detour. He didn't ask permission. He didn't need it. He drove to a small town tucked deep in the Midwest, where the streets were quiet and the houses worn. A white porch with peeling paint, a flag fluttering limply in the autumn wind. Emma's mother opened the door. Her hair was streaked with gray, her eyes tired but sharp. She froze when she saw him standing there in uniform, his cap under his arm. "Mrs. Mitchell," he asked softly. She nodded, her lips trembling. "You're one of hers." Carter swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am. She saved my men. She saved me." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry out, didn't break. She simply opened the door wider. "Come inside." They sat at a small kitchen table, the smell of coffee lingering in the air. Photographs lined the walls, Emma as a child on her father's shoulders, Emma in a soccer uniform, Emma in her flight suit grinning beside the hog. Carter placed a small, battered notebook on the table. "She left this behind, a note. She wanted you to know she loved you." Her mother's hands shook as she took it, pressing it to her chest. She was just like her father, always flying into storms no one else would touch. Carter's voice was rough. "And because of that, 81 families still have their sons, their brothers, their fathers." Her mother closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Then it wasn't for nothing." Carter nodded. "No, ma'am, it was everything." He left the house hours later, the sun setting behind him, the weight in his chest heavy but steady. Emma's story was hers now and his. Back at his unit, Carter told it again and again. To the men who had been there, to the new recruits, to anyone who would listen. He spoke of the hog that roared through fire, the pilot who defied orders, the woman who chose dignity over survival. And slowly, quietly, her story spread. Not through official reports, not through the polished words of command, but through whispers in barracks and hangars. Through the kind of stories soldiers tell when the night is long and the silence heavy. They called her Thunderbolt's daughter. They called her the Angel of Coringal. And though her name never appeared in Reynolds's record books, it carved itself into something deeper, the hearts of the men she saved. Carter carried it with him always. And when he stood at Arlington months later, watching the wind ripple through endless rows of white stones, he whispered her name. Not for the stone, not for history, but for her. "Emma Mitchell," he said softly. "You stayed when no one else would. You'll never be forgotten." And as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the field of sacrifice, he felt it not in his ears but in his chest. A voice gentle, certain. "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts."